We created a programme with 5 online sessions. Each session is 3 hours long. And then at the end, we thought it was really important to have an in-person meetup. So that is the sector focus event, which happens at the end of the programme. The sessions follow a bit of a journey. We start off by really focusing in on the participants as a leader, and then also looking at their team. Then in the next session, we look at team culture and the importance of having a shared team vision. We look at things like the impact of working in a hybrid world. Then we move on to focus on operational effectiveness. So how to do things well and how to know that you're doing things well. Influencing within the university, to the next section, looking out from a careers service perspective and looking out wider across the university. We talk about how we engage across the whole institutional community. We focus a lot on how you negotiate with colleagues, how you build relationships, how to say no and when to say no. There's lots of really interesting discussion that comes from that session. And then the final online session, we then look outside the university and we talk about engaging external stakeholders. We talk about why we do this, how to do it, and how this grows your own influence within the sector. All of the online sessions are delivered by Rachel, who is one of the little pictures there. Rachel is an L&D professional and she is the anchor person for the programme. So Rachel is on every session and sort of is the point of contact for everybody on the programme. And then the sessions are then delivered by Rebecca, Mike or myself. We sort of divvy them up between us. So you get a variety of presenters and a variety of styles and a variety of different anecdotes as well, which I think worked really, really well on the first programme. And then we finished up the programme with the sector focus event, the in-person event, where we all come together for the day and get to finally meet each other in person. And the last one we had, it was a brilliant event. We held it in Birmingham. There was a real buzz in the room. Everybody was sort of high energy. We got to hear from some brilliant leaders in the sector as well at that event. It was really good, a really good end to the programme, and lots of really good feedback from all the participants. So if you want to go back a slide, Mike, we have really focused on the materials that we use for the course as well. We have lots of things that we send you during the programme. Before the session, you get a email like this with some activities to take part in just to prepare for the session and get in the right headspace. This is not a massive load of work. It's just really short articles to read or short videos to watch or podcasts to listen to. And then you'll also get a summary after the session and a recording of the session too. So that's a bit about the programme and why we started the programme. So now I'm going to hand over to Rebecca to talk about the L&D principles behind the programme.
Lovely. Thank you, Emma. Good morning, everybody. So I think one of the great advantages of the work that we do is that we do bring the best of that kind of understanding of leadership development and learning and development principles. We have some really fabulous learning professionals in the team, people like Rachel, who's headed up learning and development strategies for organisations like the British Museum, Save the Children globally, people like myself and my colleague Kerry, who've worked in large global corporate organisations. So we really approach this programme, yes, as Emma said, wanting to make it sectorially specific, and we obviously have decades of wonderful experience of people who are of and for the sector contributing to the programme and the shape of the programme, so it's right for the context, but it's designed by learning professionals. So just to talk you through some of those kind of elements, if you like, in terms of our leadership development and learning and development approach that we apply to the design of the programme. We very much aim for that sweet spot around 50-50 support and challenge. So we create a safe space for learners where they can be vulnerable, they can share what they're struggling with, they can get advice. Certainly those kind of peer group sessions that happen in between each session allow people to not only apply the learning but then support each other in terms of what they've struggled with and how they've applied it within their own unique context. So that support is there both from the programme leaders but also from peers as well. But that comes with a healthy dose of challenge too. So really asking people through the process of hearing from and working with people across the sector, and from thought leadership and agitation and some healthy provocation to question perhaps the status quo and norms within their own institution, simply because it's the way it's always been done. Should it be done now in a different way? So we really try and hit that sweet spot between 50-50 support and challenge for people so that they're being stretched but in a safe environment. We take a blended learning approach to both the design and the delivery. So as you've seen, there are online elements, face-to-face elements, pre-learning, post-learning, what we call follow your curiosity builders, so that we present people with not one size fits all, but rather we recognise that leadership needs to be authentic in order to be meaningful. So that first session that I lead about understanding yourself as a leader is hugely critical to the whole journey, encouraging people that there isn't a singular model or a singular approach to leadership which works for everyone, but rather genuine leaders and hugely successful leaders understand their strengths. They are vulnerable. They share those things that they're working on with their team, and they bring their team with them on that leadership development journey. So it's about authenticity, following your curiosity, presenting participants with a range of models and approaches to explore, both that we introduce them to, but again, we surface that knowledge and experience and wisdom from other participants in the group. What has worked for them that may work for others, or perhaps others could try on for fit. We also think about continually adapting and changing and responding the content of the programme. So it's not a static programme in terms of its content or its approach. We take continuous feedback from participants throughout the programme, and we're responding to the continuously emerging trends that we're seeing both within the early talent and early career space from employers, but also across the sector within university careers and employability teams. So we're constantly evolving and responding to both feedback from participants and from the changing context within the environment that we're operating in. I've mentioned that cross-sector element. That's really critical for us. We recognise that leadership in different institutions is different. You know, the challenge in terms of your strategic visibility to the university executive group, your levels of resource, the depth of management and leadership experience in your team, the student mix that you have, the position that you have within the organisation in terms of influence, all these things are very, very different. And we really wanted to bring the best of mixed groups together in order to learn and share from one another. So that's a hugely important part of the learning design and learning principles. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the raft of different learning design principles that we applied to how we created the programme. If we have a look then a bit more at the programme leaders you'll be working with. So I've mentioned my wonderful colleague Rachel, a programme leader who essentially anchors the learning for the participants throughout the programme, a consistent voice contributor and a deep learning professional who understands the concepts of both learning and coaching and development for participants. So Rachel curates the programme and contributes to the programme from a leadership and development perspective. We then have the different contributions from myself, from Mike, and from Emma, who between us have all worked in a raft of different types of institutions. As Emma says, we like to share some of our own anecdotes and experiences, not only from our time as sector leaders, but also from what we're hearing and what we're seeing now that we work across the sector with a raft of different institutions and clients, both here in the UK and beyond. So we're able to bring different perspectives. Again, you know, for those of you who do know Emma, Mike, or I, you'll know that we're different leaders ourselves. We have different approaches, we have different perspectives, and we bring different things to our own personal leadership journey and style. And again, we felt that was incredibly important for participants to hear and see that there is no single way of being a fantastic leader within a careers and employability context, but rather it's about developing yourself as a leader and finding your own authentic style. Now, you might also be thinking, well, I don't just want to sit here and listen to what Gradconsult think and feel about careers and employability leadership. And you'd be quite right to think that. And we were extremely conscious of that in the design. And so one of the things that we sought to do was to interview brilliant sector leaders from a raft of different kinds of institutions. So the programme is interspersed with videos, content and insights from a whole raft of really great people across the sector. We're going to click into the next slide shortly and you'll be able to see just some of the people that you'll be hearing from in terms of their perspectives and their leadership journeys that are shared with participants across the programme, and a short video, about a minute and a half long, from Stephen Boyd. If we can move on to that, Mike, now, that would be wonderful.
I think we've all been there. This has been a challenge that I don't think there's a service in the sector that hasn't been faced with this dilemma or had to wrestle with this at some point. So I think there's a few ways. There's no textbook answer for this, but I think from my experience, having done this several times over my career, and in particular a large scale in 2 different careers services, you need to start with a clear vision and objective of what you want to achieve. If you're the leader within the careers and employability function, and you're initiating this change of approach or a change of structure or whatever it may be, then you need a really robust rationale for the vision, the end point that you're hoping to see. And that's your ongoing point of reference throughout everything. So when things get tough or you're getting lots of pushback from certain things, or people are telling you don't know what you're talking about, or people are saying it's worked this well for 870 years, and what do you know, and all the rest of it, you need that steady point of reference to kind of get you through that kind of murkiness, because you've got a well thought out kind of robust rationale to what your ultimate objective is. Having said that, it doesn't mean that you need to plot every single detail of where you are now to where you want to get to and stick dogmatically to that, because that'll never happen. It'll never work like that. Plus, you know, you'll just annoy everybody, and it won't look collaborative or collegiate, and it'll just fall short of what you're trying to achieve anyway, because there's so many unknowables and unpredictables along the way. It's just a waste of effort. So yeah, absolutely, have the ultimate vision in mind. That, after all, is the reason why you're trying to initiate these changes. But then everything else has to be, where possible, done in the spirit of collegiality and being collaborative and genuinely listen. Not saying, oh, now we're going through a review exercise and I'm going to tokenistically listen to what people have to say about things, because, you know, people see through that. You've got to genuinely listen, be willing to consider alternatives and compromise, but your point of reference remains that ultimate objective, of course. But, you know, along the way, you can be pragmatic and you can, you know, have a think about how other people view things and their perspective.
I think it's fair to say that, we thoroughly enjoyed having those reflective conversations with leaders from right across the sector about the transitional experiences that they had when they moved first into leadership roles, the lessons that they'd learnt away, the mistakes that they had made along the way. I think the sharing of that wisdom and experience, which has been done so generously and so openly with that range of different people, really adds a huge amount of learning and development. We also, of course, have great leaders from across the sector who, are in bigger roles now beyond careers and employability, but within the sector, and share, perhaps that broader piece about a leadership development journey, not just the HE and careers and employability specific lens. So they're just some of our wonderful contributors. You will hear from a range of different contributors throughout the programme, as well as ourselves as the programme leaders and curators. I feel like you've probably heard enough from us as Team Gradconsult at this point in time. I'm a great believer that when things work, they speak for themselves. And here's just an example of some of the things that we've had back from our participants on the first programme. We're incredibly proud of the feedback that we've received from them. And in order to really bring it to life, I want to hand over now to my colleague, Mike Gray, who's going to be in conversation with one of our wonderful participants, Helen, and Helen's director and leader, Gareth, about their experience, both as participants, but also as a director sending a colleague through the programme of emerging leaders. So over to you, Mike. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. So I'm delighted to be doing this section with two fabulous leaders from across the sector. So before we start, would you like to introduce yourselves? Can I start with you, Helen?
Yes, sure. Morning, everyone. My name's Helen Atkinson. I'm the Career Development and Academic Support Manager at the University of Sunderland.
Excellent, thank you. And Gareth?
Morning, everybody. I'm Gareth Trainer. I'm the head of the Centre for Graduate Prospects at the University of Sunderland.
Great. So we're going to sort of talk a little bit about your experiences from both sides in terms of your experiences of the programme. So I'd like to start with you, Helen, if that's okay. You were exactly the sort of person we were hoping to attract to complete this programme, and we were genuinely so excited to see brilliant people like you signing up, and the cohort that we had on the first cohort and the cohorts for the next cohorts are looking fabulous as well. So what I'm really interested to know from you is what were you hoping to get from the programme? What made you sign up?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It was almost spooky when I saw Gradconsult start posting about this programme. So I was, just to give a bit of context, I was working as a careers consultant elsewhere at another university, and was transitioning into the role that I have currently at the University of Sunderland. So when I saw this programme, I think Gareth was already on it, but it was going to be one of the first things I wanted to talk to him about when I started in my role. So I'd been a careers consultant for about 5.5 years. So, feeling, I would say quite comfortable in that role, the sort of natural cycle that role follows, and was looking to move into a leadership role. So secured this new role at Sunderland. And I think, this programme couldn't have come at a better time for me, in that I felt that, I hadn't really had much sort of managerial leadership experience. I'd had sort of experience leading a sort of a cross-working group through the work that I do with ADCAS. But I think for me, what I really valued from the programme and what I really wanted to get out of it was mainly that headspace, really, because I think when you're sort of thrust into a new role at a new institution, everything's new. You're on your A game all the time, new colleagues, new people to meet, etc. And actually just having 3 hours every couple of weeks to just take a bit of a breath, really, and really think about my own development and reflect on how things were going so far. I think also it's important to step out of that bubble. I think, we're all sort of guilty sometimes of being so focused on the day job and what we do, day to day in our institution, that sometimes we can lose sight of the bigger picture if we're not keeping sort of up to date with what's going on in the sector and taking time to sort of build those networks. So I think certainly the opportunities to sort of work and collaborate with people from across the sector was something that that really appealed to me, and I can perhaps tell you a bit more about that later in the conversation in terms of how that went.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So, Gareth, obviously you sent a number of your growing fabulous team on this program, which we were delighted about. So, what was it about the program that sort of convinced you to sort of invest in this development for your team?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we sent all of the leadership team, the new leadership team, for the Centre for Graduate Prospects, and actually a lot of them, well, a number of them had been here for the university for a while, but all of them were in new roles. You know, this was on the back end of a sort of restructure, redesign, some really different strategic thinking, and I suppose that's kind of what rang the first bell, was that, you know, we were preparing to do things that were perhaps themselves a little bit different, a little bit new, not your sort of classic approach to answering the calls of careers and employability and enterprise from a leadership perspective. So in that sense, there was you know, an initial resonance, and kind of looking at the program, I suppose I would summarize the program as I was going through it as, you know, this feels like one of those kind of, you know, how to stay alive as an agent of change in sort of 5 not so easy steps kind of a program. And I thought, actually, yes, that's the thing. We had a range of people with that team, like Helen, who were sort of new to leadership at this kind of scale and reach, those that were familiar with it as well. But we were going to have to find a way of providing them with, as a team, a sort of common language, a sort of benchmarked understanding of some of the tactics, approaches, challenges in all of this. I think the other thing to point to that you know, without wanting to be too gushy about it, Gradconsult, as has been explained, you know, they are working with universities, with employers and other organizations who are asking questions, and the delivery team are facilitating the exploration of answers. So from my perspective, it was kind of like, actually, this is also a way of us having an understanding of what's happening in the sector, what that sort of, we know what's happening here, believe me. I'd spent a year sort of looking through what was happening here, but kind of what was happening elsewhere. So that that availability of those kind of deep insights, if you like, was really attractive. And from the participants' perspective, you know, as somebody supporting these leaders, I was very aware that I was going to have to help them build networks fast. Okay, because we know a lot of what happens in this industry is done through partnerships, associations, connections, and so it looked like another way of doing that.
Excellent, thanks, Gareth. And feel free to be gushy. We're perfectly happy for you to gush away. So Helen, you've talked about sort of what attracted you initially. So what were your experiences on the programme?
Yes, thanks, Mike. I can maybe talk a little bit about the sort of the webinars and the sort of the content perhaps first, and then I can talk more about the sort of the networks and that sort of more human interaction that the program sort of facilitated as well. So I think, you know, to start things off, I would say that Gradconsult really did you know, organise this brilliantly. I think having Rachel in the background as the anchor, as our sort of constant during each of the programme sessions, provided that reassurance and that continuity. I think Gradconsult were also very sort of tuned into the fact that we all learn in different ways, we all prepare in different ways. So one of the things that they did that was touched on earlier is they sent a sort of a pre-work PDF doc with videos for us to watch, research articles, you know, LinkedIn posts, etc., for us to sort of consider and reflect on really in advance of our sessions. They also sort of provided further context if you were particularly interested, for instance, in a topic and you wanted to do a bit more reading, do a bit more digging into a certain topic. There was lots of information that was provided, so it felt like the live webinars that we did were very much scaffolded by sort of lots of useful resources that we could then take on to use and reflect on further. I think the webinars, I don't know for some of you here, 3 hours is a long time, and it is a a significant amount of time to sort of give up when everybody is so busy. But I think the way that they were sort of broken down, so we had a couple of breaks, so don't worry, you're not being you're not doing stuff for 3 hours constantly, so regular breaks as part of that 3 hours. But I think also in terms of the nature of the mix of activities, so thinking about how the program was designed. There were videos for us to watch. We regularly went into breakout rooms, sometimes just in pairs, sometimes in maybe small groups of 3 to 4, to reflect on a particular topic, to share insight into what we were doing in our own institution. So the sort of variety, I think, that the program offered in terms of how content was delivered and how we then reflected on that, for me, that really was something that I think a lot of the learners on the program found beneficial, because it really did sort of cater to everyone. I think in terms of topics, obviously Emma's sort of spoken about the 5 key webinar topics and what's covered. I think one of the things that really sort of resonated with me was the sort of principle of authentic leadership. I think when you're moving into a leadership role, you think about modeling, and you try and model your behavior on maybe the good stuff that you've seen, and try and forget the not so good sort of leadership that you've maybe seen in the past. But I think sometimes you can go into that sort of territory of trying to compare yourselves as well, and oh well, he did it that way and that was a much better way of doing it, and that whole imposter syndrome sort of kicks in. So I think there's some really interesting stuff around authentic leadership that Rebecca and Rachel shared in the first webinar, and that for me has sort of been one of the key takeaways, that I've just got to find my groove here, and I can kind of take on insight and model myself on others, but ultimately it is about me finding my own way, and if that's different to someone else, then fine. I think also in terms of I spoke about the sort of the networking and the opportunities that the program provided. So as I've said, loads of opportunities to speak to other program participants throughout the 5 webinars, but we were all put into these growth groups. So I had a group of, there were 3 of us, so that was quite interesting because we were all at different stages as well in our career. So we had somebody who was a careers consultant who was interested in progressing into a leadership role, but wasn't quite there yet. We had somebody in an employer engagement role who was sort of supervising somebody for the first time. So it was a nice mix in terms of types of roles that we had, and also perhaps the levels of kind of leadership and management that we had. And I think that just goes to show that we can demonstrate leadership, and we can be a leader without being a leader in a traditional sense, and sort of managing a huge team. I found the growth groups really useful. So our team were pretty good at sort of meeting up in between all of the different sessions. It was quite cathartic and useful from an insight perspective to swap notes and to understand more about, well, what a university that's maybe similar to the students that we have here at Sunderland, what are they doing, what are the challenges that they're facing. And it's something that we've continued to sort of catch up on over the summer. So I met my growth group actually about 2 weeks ago. A couple of Fridays ago, we had a catch-up call just to check in and see how things were going over the summer. And again, that the program's obviously facilitated those networks. So I think really expertly designed and well executed from Gradconsult. And I think since the program has ended, I'm still benefiting from that network that the program's given me. That was a really long answer, Mike, but
that's
hopefully
awesome.
useful insight.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think the strength of the cohorts as well is we've talked quite a lot about the contributions from the amazing leaders across the sector, and we've tried to sell our competence as learning development delivery team, but ultimately I think a lot of the richness in the sessions comes from the participants as well, and those conversations, and we try and leave lots of space within there to sort of capture some of those thoughts and examples as well. And I think that's where a lot of the learning comes from. I'm also quite cognizant of the fact we've all mentioned Rachel in glowing terms, but she's not here, and you might think, well, do they keep her in a dungeon and sort of bring her out when it's time for the programme to be delivered? She's actually at the Rugby World Cup supporting Scotland, so she's got a very good reason not to be here. So we've heard from Helen about her experience of the programme. One of the things we tried to do was keep sort of managers engaged and connected and sort of involved and up to date with what was going on with the programme as we went through. So Gareth, can you talk about your experiences as a manager of sort of having participants on the programme?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm just going to be honest. My initial feeling was jealousy. I feel like I started to hear a buzz about the program. I think everybody was a bit kind of, how's this going to pan out? Everybody was like, gosh, how am I going to fit this in? Particularly as we were going through, you know, redesign and recruitment and restructuring, all these kind of things. But you know, you're just hearing the back end of conversations between them all, and you're going, oh, I wish I knew what that was about. And I suppose that jealousy led to feeling quite paranoid. What happens if the program is telling them all the things that I should be doing as a leader, but perhaps aren't doing as a leader, and all that kind of stuff? So I really enjoyed that particular roller coaster. But let me tell you, it was refreshing. It was relief, and it was actually thoroughly interesting to be sent as the sort of line manager of the participants. Little videos. So after each session that the participants did, the team recorded you know, pretty short videos for line managers to just help them understand what been covered in the sessions, what sort of challenges had been set, what kind of things they'd been working on. Now this proved for me to be really useful. Firstly, reassuring, because you know, when you invest in leadership education, you want to make sure that it's going the way you need it to go, and so that was really helpful. But also, I think I don't know how unique we were in this, but I felt that we had the opportunity to kind of almost reshape the process that we were on, you know, back at the ranch, around some of the topics and some of the things that were coming in, and that meant, I hope that meant that gave our managers opportunities to apply pretty instantly what they were doing. And like I said before, I think people see leadership in all kinds of different ways, as Rebecca was saying, as you've all said, and this was establishing that common language. And I felt myself adapting how I maybe was going to tackle, you know, internal visibility, leveraging mutually beneficial partnerships externally. I felt myself adapting some of my language, if you like, to that of the program, in order to again try and build this the resonance. But I think, you know, one of the things that I think is a bonus for anybody who is sort of sponsoring somebody through a program like this is that you do end up receiving the benefits of those conversations that Helen was just talking about, those growth groups in particular, but also hearing from experts that you know, are really, really useful. And I'd like to think, we were fairly successful at creating the space for the participants to come back to the ranch and sort of say, well, actually, somebody in my growth group is doing X or from Y, and their experience of this was that. And actually, as the course was going along, it was rich for our development as a team, as well as development as individuals, of leaders, myself included.
Great, thank you so much. And I think one of the things that sort of come up in the conversations around sort of one of the challenges of finding the time, and we're sort of very aware of the fact that, you know, as leaders and sort of managers within services, that sort of time is at a premium. And as an example of how we're constantly evolving the program and sort of taking on feedback, we want to obviously keep the momentum of the program, but we've actually shifted for the next cohorts from rather a session every 2 weeks, it's now going to be a session every 3 weeks. So it's a slightly longer period of time from start to finish, but also it's slightly less sort of pressured in terms of finding that time between sessions to meet, and also just to get a little bit more time to sort of, for that learning to sort of distill and to follow curiosity and all of those things. So we felt that would be sort of a positive shift as well. So yeah, we're constantly sort of thinking and evolving and sort of challenging ourselves to sort of see how we can further improve it and make it as easy as possible as well for sort of leaders and managers to sort of get the benefits from the program as well. So Finally then, Helen, so you've talked about how sort of ongoing sort of your relationships has been with your growth group, which is fantastic to hear, and is sort of yeah, something that we're sort of really proud of, how those networks have built and been developed. But what would you sort of summarize the sort of impact as being of going through this program for you?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think firstly it's been that confidence as a leader, that everyone's got challenges. Everybody, sometimes feels like they're not doing a good job, and having that sort of forum to have discussed that in the program really kind of is something that I reflect back on quite regularly. If you've had a rough day or a challenging day, that actually this is the same for everyone, despite what you see on Twitter and social media. Behind the scenes, sometimes people are having a bad day, they just don't shout about it in the same way. So certainly that sort of confidence that I can do this, and I am sort of kind of I guess my own sort of leader in my own sort of way. I think the other thing that I'm sort of finding has been quite useful. So I've been sort of revisiting a few of the materials over the summer. So it's appraisal season at the moment at Sunderland. So trying to think, yes. Thanks, Gareth. Looking forward to mine tomorrow with Gareth. But I think one of the things that I'm doing is I've looked through some of the materials and thinking about how I can maybe coach colleagues in my team with their own leadership skills and capabilities as well. So I think it's that if you're sending somebody from your service or your centre on this programme, it's thinking about, well, how else might they benefit others who don't complete the programme, but how sort of principles and training and exercises, etc., how all of that can be shared. So at Sunderland, we're going through a massive period of change, and that is that is challenging for people. So giving them that confidence to really consider, well, what is it that you could delegate, or what is it that you could do that's most urgent today? What could you maybe put off for another week, and just trying to, I suppose, enhance that self-efficacy a little bit in colleagues. So I think that for me is one of the big takeaways, that sort of trying where possible as much as I can to find that time to keep referring back to things and to follow my curiosity when I didn't have the time to follow my curiosity 3 months ago on a particular topic, to remember that resource is there, and that network is there now to sort of pick things up on. So it's definitely had a longer sort of term impact. It didn't feel like it was a complete the program done. As a leader, you've always got to develop and change and sort of grow. So I think hopefully we'll be using these materials at Sunderland for a while longer.
That's great. That's great to hear. And I think, we obviously have big ambitions when we develop a program like this, but to hear some of those sort of additional ripple effects that maybe even as sort of a program team, you're not necessarily seeing firsthand, is really sort of gratifying for us as well. So thank you for that. So Gareth, and for you as sort of a head of service, what do you feel this sort of impact's been for sort of having a number of your team on this program?
Mike, it's been a complete nightmare. They've come back with ideas. They've come back with confidence. They've come back with resilience. I just can't knock them down. It's been an absolute nightmare. When you're somebody who just wants to stick to a single plan, doesn't care what other people think, and actually isn't that bothered about what happens to the students or academics that we work with, it's a total nightmare. But seriously, I think what I saw immediately from the program starting was application. Again, maybe that was partly about our timing, and I must admit I did jiggle with our sort of schedules and stuff. So sort of service design. I mean, when you're in a leadership team meeting and the topic of conversation is, okay, what do we need to stop doing? Typically in the past, that's a conversation that is wild for one reason or another. In our case, I think everybody was tuned into that, fully cognizant of that, and strangely enough, we were able to get through some good conversations about things to stop. And so my point there, my illustration there, is that they come back ready to apply, and there's lots of questions, but again, I think probably the point of I think I've been trying to think about how to describe it. And the best way I can describe it is the programs seem to add a kind of layer of defense. Now, that didn't mean that we were under attack at all, because these changes we're making here, they're part of a big strategy, and that we're making good progress with it. But knowing, I think Helen touched on it a moment ago, but knowing that this isn't an unusual thing, that someone challenging something, providing alternatives, maybe feeling a bit out of your depth, walking into your office and just being able to smell the ambiguity about what's happening next. Those are natural parts of making change, and there are ways that you can cope with those. So that sort of layer of defense, that sort of resilience, I think has been built really nicely into the team. And as Helen says, we are doing appraisals at the moment. And I suppose one other feature that I'm kind of recognizing in their prep is it's given them a platform from which to reflect on future development needs. So, the leader that thinks they've been trained, they're ready to go, and that's it, they're set for life, is not going to end up being the leader that I'm sure they wanted to be in the first place. This is about giving people some really rich insights into some key skills, behaviors, attitudes, and challenges that kicks off an ongoing conversation of development. And to be totally honest with you, as Helen's been hinting at, as I've been hinting at, we've had a lot of things to achieve in a relatively short period of time, and I'm genuinely of the view that I'm not sure we would have achieved all of the bits that we have achieved if the program hadn't helped set some of that common language, some of that expectation. We would have had to build in time for the leadership team to do deeper conversations that in our case have been supported by you guys and the work you've done on the program. So those are the sort of initial signs of impact, but I'm pretty sure, again, as Helen is hinting at, we'll be grateful of the impact of the program for a long time to come.
Thank you so much. And we're often talking about evaluation and how will we know if it's been successful, and how will we know if it's had the impact in terms of within services. And clearly it's a sort of complex world, so it's hard to measure those things, but it's really great to hear that there's those impacts are taking place, and sort of it's helping you sort of drive forward a service at such a sort of an important time for Sunderland as well. So thank you so much. Thanks so much for being so open, for obviously investing in the program in the first time we ran it, for sort of trusting us to deliver this sort of leadership journey for you. And it's been sort of fantastic having you, Helen, on the program, and your contributions were so rich and valuable throughout the program as well. So and Gareth obviously supporting it and investing in it, and sort of being so engaged throughout as well. We really appreciate it. So we've now allowed a bit of time for colleagues to sort of ask any questions. I'm going to bring Emma and Rebecca back on screen. Obviously some of those questions might be for you, Gareth or Helen, so we'll keep you on as well if that's okay. So we're using the chat function, so if anyone's got any specific questions, if they can add them into there, that'd be fantastic. So I'm going to hand back to Emma to sort of lead this part.
Thanks, Mike. Obviously at Gradconsult we have been excited about this Emerging Leaders programme for quite a long time now, and so it's just lovely to hear from Helen and Gareth that they share our sort of delight in the programme as well. I'm just looking at the Q&A and we don't have any questions, so it would seem that we've covered everything that we needed to cover already, which is great. I'll just give you a moment or two in case anything springs to mind, but I'll talk through a few of the logistics around the programme. There is a comment in the chat now, Ireland or Scotland in the World Cup, and Rachel is supporting Scotland, I think.
Yeah. And as our programme leader, I think we're going to have to go with Scotland on that. So.
So some sort of the logistics around the programme. The next cohort of the programme starts in the first week of November, and it runs through until the end in-person event is on March the 6th for this cohort. So we do have full dates for the programme that we can send you if you need them for making your decision. The cost of the programme is £950 plus VAT. And if you would like to book a space, then you can drop me an email. My email is emma@gradconsult.co.uk. I will drop that in the chat, or you can drop me a message on LinkedIn. A quick question for Helen. How was it being an online learner? Were there any challenges with this?
Oh, that's a good question. Personally, I didn't face any challenges. I think just because of the nature of the programme, because the fact that we've got people from Welsh universities, all over the UK, essentially, it obviously makes kind of meeting up very regularly a little bit harder logistically. For me, I found it fine. I think just advanced preparation, so it didn't always work, but when I could, I tried to work from home those days, just so that during the breaks I had a bit more of a space for kind of relaxing and making a cuppa in between sessions. I think the growth group, again, that kind of helped, because in a way in between webinars, that in a way was a sort of a target to do some of the sort of homework that's set after each session, because you had that deadline that actually you needed to talk about it with your growth group in a week and a half's time. So I think that helped in terms of just preparing myself for that online environment. And I think just blocking out time to do things like the pre-work was useful. So I would look like Friday afternoon, I'd take an hour or so to kind of go through everything, just to make sure that I'd gone through it and had a bit of a chance to reflect on it, so that I wasn't looking at it 10 minutes before the workshop began in a bit of a hurried, rushed way. So I think what I'd say is that I personally found it great, but I would just be disciplined with your time and blocking out time to really focus on this, because you put a lot of money into this, so you want to make sure that you're dedicating the time to it that it deserves.
Thanks, Helen. That's great. And we've got another question here. How do we decide who will go into each growth group? So there was no massive formula around this. We weren't, it was quite random. One of the things we tried to do was we made sure definitely that no one was with anyone from their own service. So that was our sort of first thing that we looked at. And we did try to look at people's roles and look at people's geography in the country as well, when we were considering them. But we did that. They were fairly random, but that approach seemed to work.
Yeah, and just on that as well, I think in the next, we're actually running 2 cohorts from November, because it's been extremely popular, and because we've got 2 cohorts, people from, when there's multiple people from different institutions, they'll be split across the 2 cohorts as well. So there won't be sort of any cohorts with sort of large numbers from any specific institution, to sort of get the full richness of and variation of engagement. And beyond the growth groups, obviously you get to engage with all of the other participants through the conversations and through other activities within sessions as well. So it's the growth group's important, but there's also lots of engagement with everyone else as well, isn't there?
Okay, and we've got a question from Darren about how many people do you have to be managing to be on this programme? As Helen mentioned before, we had all sorts of leaders in the first cohort, and I think that adds the richness to it. We had somebody who was interim director of a careers team. We had someone who was, we had lots of different managers across different functions within careers teams. We had people who were looking to take that step into management as well. So we are quite open with it, and I think that everybody sort of found, whatever level they were at, found value from the last programme. I hope that helps, Darren. Great. Okay, any more questions? No? I think we might be done. So I'd just like to thank again Helen and Gareth for their brilliant reflections on the programme. It's great to have you join us today, and I think, you know, we can say what we like about the programme, but actually you guys saying it is so much more powerful. So yeah, if you're interested in booking a space, do just reach out to get in touch. We hope to see loads of you on the next cohort. We do have just 15 spaces left for November, so probably best, if you are considering it, just to drop us a note and let us know so that we can reserve that space for you. Great. All right, thanks very much everyone. And